The dancing club was a bal musette in the Rue de la Montagne, Sainte-Geneviève. 5 nights a week, the working people of the Panthéon Quarter danced there. So begins the passage from Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, which we'll be focusing on for this particular virtual tour. So where we are right now is number 46, Rue de la Montagne Sainte-Geneviève, which was known to be one of the bal musette. Whether or not it is the bal musette that Hemingway is specifically referencing in The Sun Also Rises is something that's up for debate. So some scholars like John Leland suggest that it is, mostly because it was a bal musette that was known for attracting homosexuals, which would fit the description from the novel, where Jake Barnes meets Lady Brett Ashley. However, some scholars like H.R. Stoneback suggest that the text isn't explicitly clear. Thus, it could be another bal musette on the street, of which there were several. We have within the text a reference to an additional one that they went to after leaving the party. If we look down the street, it stretches some ways, so there were several bal musette along the street during Hemingway's time, which he might have been referring to. So that's something that is a little bit unclear, but for the sake of starting our tour, we'll start here and move along the street. Before I do that, I wanted to read a bit more from the passage to sort of situate us in the text. We went into the next bar, and I sent a waiter for a taxi. Well, I said, we're out away from them. We stood against the tall zinc bar and did not talk and looked at each other. The waiter came and said the taxi was outside. Brett pressed my hand hard. I gave the waiter a franc and we went out. Where should I tell him? I asked. Oh, tell him to drive around. I told the driver to go to the Parc Montsouris and got in and slammed the door. Brett was leaning back in the corner, her eyes closed. I sat beside her. The cab started with a jerk. Oh, darling, I've been so miserable, Brett said. All right, so we'll continue on our way then, and when we get a little bit further, we'll read a little bit more. So continuing down the street, and come to this little place here, and we're going to go this way. Continue on to Rue de la Montagne Sainte-Geneviève. So you can see that there's some cafes and such things along the street, and this is definitely, with the bal musette, would have been a popular spot for nightlife, so it would have been something that was bustling in a sense. So as we head down this street, we can see a church. So looking at this, we can get a perspective of it here. Coming around this way, we get another perspective of the church. I'm going to come around to the front so we can see it a little bit better. Okay. So this is Saint-Étienne-du-Mont, which is mentioned in the text. So the specific part from the text reads, the taxi went up the hill, past the lighted square, then on into the dark, still climbing, then leveled out onto a dark street behind Saint-Étienne-du-Mont. Went smoothly down the asphalt, past the trees, and the standing bus at the Place de la Contrescarpe. So we're going to get to that section of the text in a second, but I wanted to take some time to look at the church. This is the Panthéon, so this is the Place du Panthéon, which we'll be passing here, so we're going to keep going. You can see it's under construction there. Here's another perspective of the church, and we're going to go back behind the church as the text indicates. On Rue Clovis, wandering down here, you can see the abbey and the church and the walls that protect it. There's actually, I believe there's a cemetery behind there. Okay, when we come out here, we're going to turn right onto Rue Descartes. traveling down along the street. There's not a whole lot to see right now, some shops and things like that. I'm going to keep going towards the park. Okay, so at this point, one of the things that we could talk about here is the way that there were cafes along the road that we were just past and along the street that we're about to go on, which is the Rue Mouffetard. So we'll keep going down the street. Okay, so this is the Place de la Contrescarpe, which is mentioned in the text as well. So we can see there's some cafes and so forth, things that would have been there during Hemingway's time. And one of the things that's interesting here is we can see that there are sort of cobblestones along the street, whereas this part is paved. So there's a part of the text that talks about the taxi ride and the movement from the paved part of the road to the cobblestones. So I'm going to read that. Then turned onto the cobbles of the Rue Mouffetard. There were lighted bars and late open shops on each side of the street. We were sitting apart and we jolted close together going down the old street. Brett's hat was off. Her head was back. I saw her face in the lights from the open shops. Then it was dark. So I'll stop there in the text and move on. So we keep going down the Rue Mouffetard. It becomes rather skinny here. So there are cobblestones on this road. You can kind of see them. I'm not sure if they're cobblestones that would have been like the ones in Hemingway's time, but cobblestones nonetheless. So we'll continue down the street. You can see some of the shops and so forth. So this is kind of described as a busy street, and wow, we have some touristy things and so forth. Sorts of modern day restaurants and so forth. It's definitely something that seems like it still reflects some of the busyness of the shops and so forth. So that's something that, although they're closed here, there are a lot of shops. It's something that at least seems similar to what Hemingway might have experienced. It's a little cafe. So we'll keep going down this street. So it describes the street as having a lot of lighted bars. I wish that we could see this at nighttime, because I think that would still give that kind of effect that's described in the text, but that's not when the Google camera came through, so we'll take what we can get. So now we have sort of a private street. Still some cafes and so forth that exist. Much more difficult for cars to pass through. There's another church there, which isn't mentioned in the text. Another plus. Out into a place where we need to turn, so we're going to go ahead and turn down this way onto the Rue Edouard Canu. So this is not a street that's specifically mentioned within the text. However, looking at the most direct way to get to the park seems like a good option. This is a place too where we might have different interpretations of the text or different ways of getting around. So I've chosen this way, others might choose other ways. And I'm going to turn left onto Rue Claude Bernard here. You can see some of these older buildings as well if we look up. Sort of the older Parisian style. Okay, so now we're on the Avenue des Gobelins. So I'm going to pause here and read from the text. So we were last talking about the Rue Mouffetard when they were jolted together. And then it seems like in the text itself that Hemingway kind of speeds up time in terms of the time that it would take them to get to this next part. So we'll go ahead and read. Then it was dark, then I saw her face clearly as we came out on the Avenue des Gobelins. The street was torn up and men were working on the car tracks by the light of acetylene flares. Brett's face was white, and the long line of her neck showed in the bright light of the flares. The street was dark again, and I kissed her. Our lips were tight together, and then she turned away and pressed against the corner of the seat, as far away as she could get. Her head was down. So at that point, we have a discussion between Brett and Jake about their relationship, although in typical Hemingway style, they don't talk explicitly about it. It's more a discussion of how close together they can be and so forth. But of course, there's much more to that discussion. So we're going to travel down the Avenue des Gobelins. And the Gobelins were tapestry makers, something that's a part of French history. So we're going to follow this to the Place d'Italie. And while I'm traveling along this street, I can tell you that there are different, this is another point of the text in which there are different interpretations about it, about which way they might have gone. So one of the interpretations of the text is that they would take the Boulevard d'Argot, which is something that Stonebeck suggests. I've decided to take the Place d'Italie and to continue down that way because it seems like the most direct route from my perspective. But again, this is something that we could look at as a place where it's difficult to interpret which way Hemingway might have intended, or if he was trying to sort of interpret space in a different way. So not necessarily needing to have it be specific to the physical landscape of Paris. So we're going to continue down this street.